Brent Hinds, the fiery singer-guitarist whose tone, touch, and idiosyncratic spirit helped power Mastodon from Atlanta clubs to arenas around the world, has died following a motorcycle accident in Atlanta. He was 51. Police said Hinds was riding a Harley-Davidson late Wednesday night when a BMW SUV failed to yield while making a turn. First responders described him as unresponsive at the scene. An autopsy later concluded that Hinds, whose legal first name was William, died of multiple blunt force injuries. News of his death traveled quickly through Atlanta and then out across the wider heavy metal community. Within hours, fans were posting riffs and memories, swapping photos from tour buses and parking lots, and writing with a stunned clarity that only comes when a musician you've invited into your life through headphones and stage lights is suddenly gone. Mastodon, the Grammy-winning heavy metal band that Hinds co-founded in 2000 and helped steer toward a distinct blend of sludge, progressive metal, and southern weirdness, summed up what so many were feeling. We are heartbroken, shocked, and still try and process the loss of this creative force with whom we've shared so many triumphs, milestones, and the creation of music that has touched the hearts of so many, the band wrote on social media. It was both a eulogy and a promise that the music would still be there for anyone who needed it. Atlanta police said the crash happened late Wednesday night at an intersection where the BMW SUV, driven by a motorist who was not publicly identified at the time, failed to yield during a turn. The Harley-Davidson carrying Hinds collided with the SUV. Despite the efforts of first responders, Hinds could not be revived. As of Thursday afternoon, investigators had not announced whether citations or charges would be filed, noting that the crash report will be updated as the case review continued. In a city where motorcycles and music are both part of the fabric, the details landed heavily. An Atlanta motorcycle accident, a Harley-Davidson rider, a familiar name, and a community trying to make sense of the loss. For anyone who followed heavy music over the past 2 decades, the name Brent Hinds is inseparable from the rise of Mastodon. He co-founded the band in 2000 with bassist and vocalist Troy Sanders, guitarist Bill Keller, and drummer Brand Daler, shaping a sound that felt like it crawled out of the Chattahoochee mud with a cosmic vision in its eyes. The early albums, Remission in 2002 and Leviathan in 2004, announced a band that could be both ferocious and strangely beautiful. By 2006, Mastodon's third studio album, Blood Mountain, crashed into the Billboard 200 Top 40, peaking at number 32 and signaling that the group's refusal to play by conventional rules was, in fact, the rule that mattered most. From there, the ascent turned into a long, complicated arc Crack the Sky, 2009, gay progressive metal a modern classic with an emotional center that few heavy albums attempt and even fewer achieve. Once More Round the Sun, 2014, and Emperor of Sand, 2017, confirmed what fans already knew. Mastodon was not a curiosity. It was one of the defining American metal bands of the century. Both albums hit number 1 on Billboard's Top Rock Albums chart, and 3 releases climbed into the top 10 of the Billboard 200. In 2018, the band won a Grammy Award for Best Male Performance for Sultan's Curse, the kind of industry nod that arrives late for bands like this, but arrives nonetheless. Hinds' guitar work was a signature thread through all of it. Where other male guitarists carved straight lines through aggression, he found sideways paths, hybrid pick flurries, slides that felt like human voices, banjo-informed runs smuggled into heavy riffs, and a rhythmic looseness that sounded playful even when it was deadly serious. He often strapped on a Gretsch with a Bigsby, coaxing tones more associated with country and surf into a sludge and prog context that shouldn't have made sense but did. On stage, his presence was part outlaw raconteur, part mad scientist, and part Alabama storyteller, all filtered through tattoos and a grin that said he was going to take the long way home, because that was where the fun lived. The Georgia scene has produced plenty of acclaimed acts, but Mastodon built a world that could hold its own alongside anyone. Brent Hinds was central to that world, not only as a guitarist and singer, but as a writer whose ideas could start in a back porch lick and end in a 3-part epic with a concept stitched through its spine. Those records, Leviathan, Blood Mountain, Crack the Sky, The Hunter, Once More, Round the Sun, Emperor of Sand, Hush and Grim, will be the way many people get to know him now that he's gone. They're loud obituaries that read like love letters to the craft of making heavy music feel alive. Even as Mastodon's profile rose, Hinds kept stepping sideways into side projects that explained him as clearly as any interview ever could. He co-founded Fiend Without a Face, a band where surf rock, rockabilly, and punk spilled into each other until the labels gave up. He helped shape West End Motel, a place where storytellers' bar songs made room for whimsy and heartache. In 2012, he joined Giraffe Tongue Orchestra with members of Alice in Chains and the Dillinger Escape Plan, a supergroup experiment that showed how well his ideas traveled. These projects weren't detours. They were maps of where he lived musically. Somewhere between the high desert and a humid back porch, ears pointed toward anything that felt alive. The past few years brought changes that no one on the outside fully understood. In March 2025, Mastodon and Hinds announced they had mutually decided to part ways. No specific reason was given at the time. On Instagram, Hinds posted comments that hinted at a rocky relationship with his former bandmates. Fans asked questions the band couldn't answer publicly, and Hinds didn't want to answer in detail. Whatever the internal story, the public record shows four musicians who built something rare, kept it going against every music business odd, and finally split after a long run together. In that context, the statement the band posted in the hours after his death carried an extra measure of poignancy. You could hear the history in their grief. The early drives, the van smells, the fights, the riffs, the long nights, the longer tours, and the satisfaction of getting it taken one or two passes because the song wanted to be in the world and you didn't want to wait. Hinds was born and raised in Alabama, a southern upbringing that found its way into his playing the way clay finds its way under your nails if you spend enough time outside. When he moved to Atlanta as a young man, he fell into the kind of music friendships that change everything. The city's metal scene at the turn of the century was a fertile mess of bands figuring out who they were by playing until 4 in the morning. Atlanta clubs like the Masquerade were proving grounds and classrooms in equal measure. That's where Brent Hinds and his future bandmates learned to stretch and burn and stop on a dime. Later, as Mastodon Records cracked the charts, Top 40 with Blood Mountain in 2006, Top 10 with Once More Round the Sun and Emperor Sand, the same guys who had played for gas money were playing late-night TV, headlining summer festivals, and signing records for lines of fans who had waited hours because the band made them feel like the weird shapes they carried inside were okay, even worthy. If you saw him play, you remember the little details. The Gretsch filtered through a wall of amps, the way a jam would appear inside a song like a window opening, and then close slammed when the band locked back into the riff. The contrast, that big timbre sound in one hand and a delicate, almost banjo-like picking pattern in the other. The humor, the sense that the heaviness wasn't an act. It was a way of transmuting chaos into something that let you breathe. It's easy, in the wake of sudden loss like this, to stack up achievements because they make the story feel organized. There are plenty to stack. Mastodon's albums rose into the top 10 of the Billboard 203 times. Twice the band topped Billboard's Top Rock Albums chart. Once More Round the Sun in 2014 and Emperor Sand in 2017. The group won a Grammy Award in 2018 for Best Metal Performance. The Metal Press wrote long pieces about how the band and its guitar singer helped push heavy music toward new ideas without letting it drift into cold technique. Hinds recorded and toured with side projects that gave him room to be a songwriter in different clothes. He became one of those rare guitarists you could identify in 3 notes, not because he was playing a signature lick, but because everything about his hands and head came through the instrument. These are facts worth repeating. They're also incomplete without the Messier truth that the work mattered because it felt human. The bare details of the Atlanta motorcycle accident that took his life, Harley-Davidson rider, BMW SUV failed to yield, unresponsive at the scene, autopsy citing multiple blunt force injuries, are hard to read if you know the roads here. There's a peculiarly local grief when the geography of a city becomes part of a story like this. You picture the intersection. You imagine the seconds before the crash. You wish the turn had been delayed by a breath. You wish the Harley had been 1 mile further down the road. You wish 100 small things that can't be unwished. In the hours after the Atlanta Police Department released their initial report, the tribute started doing what tributes do, filling the space where a person used to stand. Peers from other bands wrote about tours shared and riffs traded. Younger guitarists posted videos of the first time they learned a Hinds line and realized they'd need to change their picking hand forever. Fans shared stories about meeting him outside a venue and discovering that the intensity on stage came with an off-stage warmth and mischief that made the encounter feel like part of the show. People who don't normally speak about metal at all wrote about how a friend dragged them to a Mastodon concert years ago and how they've been waiting for another chance to be changed by something loud ever since. There are also the quieter numbers that don't get printed on plaques. Years spent in bands. Long stretches when the industry got hot for a different kind of sound, and bands like Mastodon had to hold their nerve. Weeks when tours felt endless and each night, nonetheless, required everything. In those trenches, a musician's worth isn't measured by lists. It's measured by what happens when someone calls your name on a downbeat. Brent Hinds was there every night. He did the thing great musicians do. He made you believe that the power coming off the stage was specific to that room, that night, that moment. His departure from Mastodon in March 2025 hadn't stopped him from making noise. Friends say he was still writing, still woodshedding pieces that could become songs or might stay as private loops that made him happy. He continued to collaborate. Anyone who has followed him across social media knew the mixture that made him who he was: jokes, jabs, riffs, and the occasional flash of a temper that made you remember artists live with their nerves near the surface. It wasn't always easy, and neither was he. That was part of why the music felt the way it did. It recognized that polish is sometimes the enemy of truth. A proper obituary for Brent Hinds has to make room for how odd and wonderful his guitar playing was. Music writers reach for labels because it helps with filing, and so we get sludge metal and stoner metal and progressive metal attached to Mastodon's name. Those signposts are useful. They are also a poor fit when you listen to how much of the South is in Brent's phrases. There's bluegrass in his pull-offs and bends. There's country slip in his double stops. There's surf in the springy echoes he loved. There's gospel in the way sections rise and fall. He didn't put those influences in the music to make a point. He put them there because that was the stew he grew up on, because Gretsch guitars with Bigsby's invite certain misbehaviors, and because life is too short not to let every part of yourself show up for the gig. Atlanta will remember him as one of its great exports, a heavy metal guitarist who never stopped sounding like he came from here. The wider music world will remember him as a Grammy-winning musician who helped change the conversation about what heavy bands could do when they refused to pick one lane. His bandmates will remember a friend they fought with and laughed with and made improbable, beautiful noise with for a quarter century. The fans who only knew him across a barricade will remember the feeling of something huge moving through them in the months afterward when a line or a lick kept popping up in their heads like a companion. Funeral plans had not been announced as of press time. The band asked for privacy for Hinds' family and encouraged fans to honor him by playing the records loud and supporting the local venues and scenes that make bands possible. That request is both literal and metaphorical. If you want to keep a musician alive, you play the songs. If you want to keep a scene alive, you show up for the next generation. If you want to honor what a guitarist like Brent Hinds did, you pick up an instrument